Hello friends, my name is Ryan. I'm going to tell you a story named The Haunted House Family's Terrifying Encounters with Spirits, which is a very amazing story full of twists. So let's start. It was a cold October evening when the Thompson family moved into their new home on the outskirts of a small, sleepy town. The house was an old Victorian mansion, standing tall and mysterious, surrounded by overgrown gardens and shadowed by looming trees. For years, it had been vacant, and the locals often whispered about its eerie past. But for the Thompsons, it was a dream come true. A large house with character and history was exactly what they wanted. The family consisted of Mark, a writer fascinated by the idea of living in a house steeped in stories, his wife Linda, who saw the move as a chance for a fresh start, and their two children, 9-year-old Sophie and 15-year-old Jake. From the moment they stepped inside, the house felt heavy, as if it carried the weight of countless untold secrets. The air was cold despite the season, and an unsettling silence seemed to fill every corner. The first few days passed uneventfully as the family unpacked and settled in. But soon, small oddities began to creep into their daily lives. At first, it was the little things. Sophie's toys would move from one room to another without explanation. Linda swore she heard faint whispers late at night, but Mark dismissed it as the creaking of the old house. Jake, however, seemed to grow increasingly uneasy. He often mentioned feeling watched, especially when he was in the attic. The attic was a peculiar place. Unlike the rest of the house, which had been renovated to some extent, the attic remained untouched. Dust-covered furniture and old trunks filled the room, and the smell of mildew lingered in the air. Jake's room was directly below the attic, and every night he would hear faint footsteps pacing above him. "It's probably just squirrels or rats," Mark assured him. But Jake wasn't convinced. One evening, Sophie came running to her parents, clutching her favorite doll. "Mommy, someone's in my room," she said, trembling. Linda immediately went to check, but there was no one there. The windows were shut, and the door had been locked from the inside. The only odd thing was the dollhouse. All the tiny furniture inside had been rearranged. Linda laughed nervously, trying to reassure Sophie, but deep down, she felt a chill. Things escalated over the weeks. Objects would disappear only to reappear in strange places. The lights would flicker without reason, and doors would slam shut on their own. One night, as Linda was preparing dinner, she heard Sophie laughing in the living room. She peeked in, only to find Sophie sitting alone. "Who are you talking to, sweetie?" Linda asked. Sophie smiled and replied, "My friend, Emily. She lives here." Linda's heart sank. "Emily?" she asked, forcing a smile. "What does she look like?" "She's small, like me. She has long hair and wears a white dress," Sophie said innocently. Mark brushed it off as an imaginary friend, but Linda couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, she did some research about the house. What she found made her blood run cold. Decades ago, a little girl named Emily had lived in the house. She had gone missing under mysterious circumstances, and her body was never found. The case remained unsolved, and the family who lived there at the time left abruptly, never to return. Linda decided not to tell Mark, fearing he would think she was overreacting. But she couldn't ignore the signs. The whispers grew louder, the footsteps more frequent, and the feeling of being watched became unbearable. One night, as Mark stayed up late working on his novel, he heard a soft knock on his study door. Thinking it was one of the kids, he opened it, but no one was there. As he turned to go back inside, he caught a glimpse of something in the hallway mirror, a shadowy figure standing behind him. When he turned around, the hallway was empty. The family decided to invite Father Matthews, a local priest, to bless the house. As he walked through each room, sprinkling holy water and saying prayers, the atmosphere grew heavier. When he reached the attic, he hesitated. "This room carries the most pain," he said quietly. He began to pray louder, but as he did, the house seemed to come alive. The lights flickered violently, and a deafening scream echoed through the attic. Sophie started crying, and Jake clutched his mother's arm tightly. Father Matthews looked pale as he descended the attic stairs. "Whatever is here is not at peace," he said. "You must leave this house." But leaving wasn't an option. The Thompsons had poured their savings into the house and couldn't afford to move. Mark decided to confront the mystery head-on. One evening, armed with a flashlight and a recorder, he ventured into the attic alone. He began asking questions, hoping to capture any signs of paranormal activity. At first, there was only silence. But then, the recorder picked up a faint voice. "Why won't you help me?" it whispered. Mark's heart raced. "Help you? How?" he asked aloud. The voice didn't respond, but the temperature in the room plummeted. The flashlight flickered, and Mark felt a cold hand on his shoulder. He turned, but there was no one there. Panicked, he ran downstairs, clutching the recorder. When he played it back for Linda, they both heard the voice. "Emily," Linda whispered. "She's still here." Desperate for answers, Linda and Mark began digging through the attic's contents. Among the old trunks, they found a diary belonging to Emily. The entries were chilling. She wrote about being afraid of someone in the house, someone who hurt her and kept her from leaving. The final entry read, "If anyone finds this, please don't let him get away with it." Linda felt a wave of anger and sadness. "We have to help her," she said. Together, they decided to hold a séance to communicate with Emily. With candles lit and the children fast asleep, they sat around the dining table, calling out to her. At first, there was nothing. But then, the candles flickered, and a soft voice filled the room. "He's still here," it said. "Who?" Mark asked, his voice trembling. Before they could get an answer, the room grew icy, and a shadowy figure appeared at the end of the hallway. It was a man, his face twisted in anger. The candles extinguished, plunging the room into darkness. The figure moved closer, and the family could feel his rage. "You shouldn't have come here," the voice growled. In a panic, Linda grabbed the diary and held it up. "We know what you did to her," she shouted. "You can't hide anymore." The shadow paused, then let out an ear-piercing scream before vanishing. The house fell silent, and the oppressive atmosphere seemed to lift. The next morning, the Thompsons found an old, hidden room in the basement. Inside, they discovered evidence of Emily's tragic fate and the man responsible, a former caretaker who had lived in the house. With the evidence, they contacted the authorities, and Emily's case was finally closed. The family held a small memorial for her, hoping to give her spirit peace. After that night, the house was quiet. No more whispers, no more footsteps. It was as if the house had been cleansed. But every now and then, Sophie would glance at her dollhouse and smile. "Emily says thank you," she would whisper. And that, my friends, is the story of the haunted house and the family's terrifying encounters with spirits. If till next time, stay curious and stay safe.